Welcome back to Danny Here's Art in part 4 of this twin bass wood carving project. In this segment I'm going to be burning on the scales, and I hope to keep it a little short because I don't want to show the whole process on both of them because it's going to be basically the same. But I'll show you how I lay my grid out to lay out the scales. I'll show you the scale tips, and I'll talk a little bit about the ones that I use and make. I'm also may try to get the fins permanently mounted and the eyes mounted in this one, in this segment also, and then that way all I have to do is go on to painting. But I apologize for it being so long between part 3 and part 4. I know I sound like a broken record on that, but winter time is tough for me here, and it's since I don't have a proper shop. Burning something like burning scales or painting I can do inside in my spare bedroom here, but I can't carve in here because it's too nasty and dirty. But anyway, appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave for me in the comment section below. And if you're new to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you consider subscribing and hit that thumbs up if you like these videos. So I'm going to get the camera turned around here and get started. All right, I want to talk just a little bit about the scale tips I'm going to be using. If you follow my channel, you know that I make my own tips, and these are ones that I made here. And these are commercial tips that I bought from Razor Tip that I first started using. And the reason I don't use them anymore is because I try to get as accurate as I can to the real thing when I'm carving. And so the problem with the ones from Razor Tip or the commercial brands is they're just a generic scale shape. There's nothing specific about it other than its scale shape. They make different sizes and different a little bit different types, like these square ones here. I don't know if you can see this or not, but these are made to where you can reference the next one next to it, and they'll give a little bit of relief to the scale. And then they have these that are round, and they just go straight down and just pretty much cut a straight line with no relief behind it. And again, they're all just generic shapes, but you can get them in different sizes. So that's why I started making my own. Fish have different shape scales from species to species, and even the same fish will have slightly different shapes on the body, and definitely different sizes. So I'll use probably 4 to 5 different sizes on this one fish, and I'll show you how I lay that out in a minute. There's probably more different sizes, but I'm not going to get that technical with it. But anyway, so I make all my own tips here, and I have a video on that if you want to check that out. And I haven't done any. I still use these small generic ones for trout, but because I haven't had much luck making anything much smaller than a 2 millimeter. So I need to make some even smaller than that, a millimeter, even smaller. So I'm going to have to experiment with that. Haven't had much luck with it yet, but I will. I'm going to be working on a technique that I learned from Bob Berry, who he made some stamps out of nail heads, and I'll show you that. I'm going to do a video on it here when I get ready to make them. But he rolls them on. They get rolled on, and it doesn't burn them on. It just imprints into the wood. But again, I'll show you how to do that once I learn how to do it myself. But I've bought the nails, and I'm going to be making some here because my next project coming up is going to be a golden trout, and so I'm going to have to be a little more accurate with the scales on that one. So anyway, I'm going to get started here. I just want to show you these ones I made, and how I'm going to do it. I've got one here also that's a little bit different. It's not actually a scale. This one's made to burn in the lateral line. So, and I'll show you how I use that later. And this is actually a commercial tip also that I use to freehand scale tips. And I'll do that mostly on the cheeks and gill plates. So I'm gonna get the wood burner fired up here and get it hot. And the wood burner I use right now is this razor tip SK. And I use the BPH pin, that way it's got these little set screws on here that I can change out the tips on. So that's why I use this BPH pin. I'm going to be buying a Coldwood pretty soon, because everybody I've talked to that uses them and everything I've read about them is they're a little more consistent in their heat ranges. The razor tip is fine, it does great, but I can burn scales, start burning scales on a fish and stop and not move the setting and come back and start again at a different day, and it's different. It burns different. It's almost like it changed or something. I don't know what causes that. If you know what causes that, you can leave me a comment in the comment section below. But it gets the job done. I've had this now for about 4 years, and it's a good unit. It gets the job done. But I'm going to be switching to the Coldwood. And the only problem with the Coldwood is you have to have an adapter between the handpiece and the cable to make it work, which is not a biggie. But I'll be getting that here pretty soon, and I'll show you that when I do get it. In the meantime, let me get this fired up and get going here, and I need to change the tips here. And I'm going to start out with doing the bigger scales. So I'll have my bigger tip here that I'm going to be putting in, and then I'm going to lay out the scale pattern here, and I'll show you that here real quick. All right, so I got my grid laid out here. Started with my lateral line, and that's the line that's on the fish that has the nerve endings on it. It goes down the side. Okay, I'm going to pause the video right here just for a second to bring up this illustration of a largemouth bass. And it has the number of scales on different parts of the anatomy that you should be looking for. So this is a great guide. You can pause the video right here if you like to write these down. But this illustration was done by Agnew. And if you don't know who he is, shame on you, because Al is a nationally known wildlife artist, and he does a lot of fish paintings as well. And if you've probably seen his work and just not realized it, if you've ever been in a Bass Pro Shop or Cabela's and flipped through one of their catalogs or magazines, or Field and Stream or something like that, you've probably seen his work and didn't realize it. But he was kind enough to let me use this illustration for this video, and I'm going to leave a link to his website in the description. So go check it out and look at some of his work, and I guarantee you've probably seen some before. So, all right, back to the video. And then on the cheeks, I'll freehand those. I'll draw those out and freehand them later. But what I do is I take a scrap piece of wood, and then I'll make sure my tip's burning right. And looks like it needs to be a little hotter. And it looks good. And what I do is I'll start just in front of the gills, and I establish a line here. And I stay below the lateral line because I'll tie those in. The scales on the lateral line are a little bit smaller. Oh, yeah, let me show you that here real quick too. So all the scales in this area here below the lateral line are going to be roughly the same size. So anything down in here. They get a little smaller on the back and on the top of the head here. And then they'll start to get smaller down here on the belly, throat latch area. And they'll get smaller along the top of the back. And there's on the top and bottom. And then they get get smaller down here by the tail. And there's like 2 different sizes that'll go smaller down here. So I keep these little ranges in mind that I'll burn. Like I'll burn all the scales with one size here, and then some above here, and then I switch and go smaller past these points. Actually, might be about right here. So back to me. Start here, and I start above, just behind the gill plate, and go back, and then I'll go forward to fill those in. And then I keep these reference lines going down here, keep me straight. Once I get several rows going, the rest of them will fall into shape if you keep it right. And I try to keep my pen in line with what I'm doing. So these will go straight back. If you notice, these are straight below the line, and above the line they kind of curve with it. So I'm going to start right here in front of the line here. And then if you notice, I'm not going right next to the other one. Going down just a little bit because there's a little gap between them. And I'm just pressing and pulling back. Might be a little too hot. Let me turn it down a little bit. And I don't want a real deep impression. I just want the hint of the scale shape in there. I see a lot of carvings where the scales are deep. And if you look at a fish, they're not deep. And I'll show you how I do them a little bit deep here, but then I'll sand them down a little bit. And I'll also, when I get done, I'll put growth rings. I don't do it with this tip. But I put growth rings on all the scales. So I'll do this and I'll go back along these, but I can go forward too. It's a little harder. Some people like to go forward, some people like to go backwards. I like to go backwards. But I can go forward. It's just a little harder for me. If you notice, I'm pressing down and pulling, and that, again, that gives it that little relief. And you don't want to go right up against, you don't want to go right next to each other. I'll show you here. You don't want to go right there next to the next one. You want to give it a gap. If you look at the fish, the scales on the fish, there's a little bit of a gap there. Can you see that? So that's what I'm doing here. Now some places they will get closer together and you may have to move and change them closer together to get your line straight again. But if you're paying attention as you go, your lines will stay kind of straight. And you may have to kind of tweak the heat range a little bit from one section to the other, because even though I use Tupelo and it's a fairly evenly grained wood, sometimes there's spots on it that's harder than others. And you'll be going along and it'll be doing fine, then all of a sudden it's like it's just almost wants to catch on fire. It's so hot. It burns in deep, too deep. And it's just because the wood got a little softer in that area. So you may have to adjust your heat a little bit as you go through. And you'll be able to tell. So I'm going to get on these and go down through here, and I'll show you some results, progress results, shots as I get farther down. Just so you don't have to sit here and watch me do the whole thing. All right, I want to talk about a couple little things here real quick. I had to stop and clean the contacts between the pin, between the tip and the set screws, because sometimes they build up a little. The turning them off and on causes them to shrink and grow, and they will get loose. And when you're working, you'll notice when they get loose, you'll start. And I don't know if it's going to do it or not because I've already fixed it. But when you're pressing down to burn, you'll hear a little buzzing, almost like an electrical sound, and all it is just not making good contact on these screws. So what I do is I take the screws off and I use a fine emery board and just kind of scrape it up a little bit, so that in the legs of the tip, because a little bit of carbon buildup on those, and it'll cause it to lose contact. And I also will occasionally just hit the back of these, because carbon builds up on the back of these as it's burning, and it'll build up and it'll kind of affect the performance of it. So just keep a little file handy and just occasionally hit that. And so you notice also that I'm not going all the way up to the lateral line here, and I'm not going all the way down across the belly, because I will switch over to a little bit smaller one for the bellies here. And the reason I'm not going all the way up here is because I'm going to use a little bit smaller scale tip along the lateral line, and then by staying away from it, when I switch to that smaller one, I can tie them in better, so it's a seamless look there. And then I'll do the same on the top. When I get to the top, I'll kind of zigzag the pattern down. That way, when I'm coming from this side, it'll let you tie them in. It's easier to tie in, and it's more of a seamless. Because if you stopped straight and then come over, you're going to be slightly off, so you may be too far, too close. So by zigzagging it, I can probably come down and look farther on this one. By making a little zigzag line here, it's easier to blend in. Does that make sense? So again, I'm just going not to the line, and zigzagging on the edges. And I'll stop here. I probably can go one more row up, because I'm going to switch over to a little bit smaller one here as well. There's a way that I know I've got my scale count right. I kind of watch early on. It's a little too late now, but there's 15 to 17 scales from the lateral line down to the bottom of the belly. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I'll be within that range, 15 to 16, 15 to 17, somewhere in there. Okay, so I've got the big scale shapes on the both sides done. Now I'm going to swap over to one that's just a little bit smaller, that'll fill in the top of the back and more under the belly, farther forward to about right in here. And I may change that and go even smaller. Where'd my pencil go? There it is. So this next smaller one will probably come up to about right here. And then I'll go to even smaller, and it may be more of a line like this. And then I'll switch to an even smaller one here. And then I'm going to fill in the belly side here with it. And I'm going to do the scales along the top of the back here, as well as under here, down to about this line. And I'll stop up here short of the back, and again short of the lateral line here. And I'll do that on both sides. And I'm also going to, like I say, I'm going to fill into the front up here. So, and the scale tip, this is the one I just used. And the one that I'm about to use is just, it's hard to tell, but it's about 1 millimeter smaller, and it's a little bit shallower. Doesn't have quite as much of an arc to it. So I'm going to put this one in my tip here. Let me turn it off. A little tip: if you get this BPH pin, buy you a couple extra set screws, because I have dropped these before and lost them, especially like I'm outside on my porch and they inevitably fall through one of the slats in the decking boards. So get you a couple extra when you order them. They're cheap. All right, I'm gonna stop about right there, and then I'll switch to a little bit smaller one down here. I'll go ahead and tie in the belly here. So that's blending. All right, let me start up here on the top here. And to do these, since these lines kind of curve, these were straight, and the ones above the lateral line are going to be kind of curved along the back. They're going to follow that curve of that lateral line. So to do that, I want to keep the pin with that curve. Here I kept it straight coming back, and here I want it to curve with that line, if that makes sense. And again, I'm going to start above the lateral line just a little bit. Then I'll just follow all the way back down here, keeping that curve of those lines with the curve of the lateral line. And I'll tie in to the lateral line with the next smallest one down from this. Another thing up here, the back is curved a little bit more, so sometimes you can't go straight down. Sometimes you have to kind of rock the tip a little bit to make it around that curve. Some of it's a little flatter, and you try it, but if it doesn't go all, like see it didn't go all the way down through there, so I'll just roll it just a little bit. All right, I'll show you when I get closer to the end. So you get the idea how I tied those in, and then I'll come do this side, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the lateral line. All right, so I got all the scales burned on, and I've got two different sizes here. This one's just a little bit smaller up here, and so now I'm going to do the lateral line and run the head and the top of the back. The smaller areas, I'm going to switch to a smaller tip. Before I do that, I'm going to start on this one, and I'm going to show you an alternative way to do the lateral line. I've seen some people do it this way. I like doing it this way first, doing the lateral line last. But some people like doing the lateral line first to establish it. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. I actually like doing it the other way better, like I said. So I've got my smaller, I forget exactly what size this is. See, I was using 4mm, and this is a 3mm. And I'm going to start up here close to the head here. And I'm just going to start right on the lateral line. Let's see here. Let me get this drawn out a little better. You can see it. So this is going to be the lateral line. We draw it in a little bit darker here. So what you can do is go right on the lateral line, start your first scale, and then come over to the side. Now on these, if you look at one fairly close, they're closer together right on the edge of it. So see where I'm establishing that middle line there. And then I'll come back here after I get it all done and put the nerve endings in it. So this is just another way you can start it. You just have to do it yourself and establish a way that it feels more comfortable for you. For me, it's doing this part first, getting those in line, and then blending in on the lateral line. So let me finish this off camera, and then I'll come back and show you what the established lateral line looks like. All right, so I'm going to talk about the nerve ending on the scale. I drew one out here so you can see it. So here's this will be the lateral line here. These scales aren't accurate, but you'll get the idea. So the actual lateral line is a little nerve ending. And it's just a little raised ridge. Similar to that. Doesn't go all the way to the end of the scale, just kind of goes down. And to do that, oh, dropped it. This is my little scale tip that I made. It's flat on one side, and I'll show you the actual way of doing it. I'm letting my tip pen cool down here a little bit. But I've got this edge here on it, and I just lay it down on the scale, pull it out. And I'll do it on the other side. And it leaves a little raised ridge. And what I'm doing is when I'm putting it down, I'm pulling that relief down off that, so it'll have a little raised ridge. So let me get my scale, let me get the tip changed out, and then I'll show you on the actual fish. But I got the line complete here. The center scale here will be the lateral line. This is just, like I say, this is just another way to do it. I like to do it and leave the line blank here and get my body scales established, and then come in and fill in the lateral line. But like I say, just have to try it both ways and see which way is easier for you. All right, so let me turn this off and get this scale tipped out, and I'll get back with you on showing you how to do it. Okay, so on this tip, it's kind of I got one that's wider and then one that's narrower, just for different size scales. And on this one, I'm going to be using the smaller size. And let's see if I can get this close enough where you can see what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to go down here beside the lateral line, the little nerve ending. And we'll touch and pull it. And I'm going to go all the way down on this one side. I'm kind of feathering it down so that it leaves just a little bit of a ridge there. I know you probably can't see that on camera. And once I get all the way down the line, I'll turn it around and do the other side. That making sense? And then I'll come down, kind of flatten the front of it a little bit. I actually come back later with a rounded tip and round these off a little bit, more of a point to round it in. I know it's hard to see on camera, but it leaves just a little bit of a raised ridge on that one scale. And I'll do that all the way down to from the back of the gill here all the way down. So let me get started on these now. I'm not going to finish these on this one until I get the rest of them done. Then I'll go in and finish these, but I'm going to go back to my body scale now. This was a 3mm. I'm going back to a 4mm to do the main body scales. I'm going to show you how I blend these now. Go from doing it on that to blending them in with after you get them done. So I'm gonna pick me a spot here, and this is back down to my 3mm. And you may have to fill in a little tip area there every once in a while. but it goes pretty easy. Let me go this way because I need to switch to a smaller one up there. And and they don't have to be exactly perfect, because if you look at a fish, the scale alignment on fish, they get wankered up here and there. They're not perfectly even. I try to keep them as straight as I can on the sides, but areas where, like where it turns and goes down into the belly or curves in the body, they'll, or around the fins, they'll the scales will bunch and change sizes, and so they're not, you don't have to be perfect with them. And you can get that illusion of it being perfect if you keep the main areas straight. Like on a real fish, the main area is going to be straight, except for when it comes to like a curved belly around the gills. Again, where it gets smaller. Best thing to do is just next time you catch a fish, study, look at the scales close, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I see a lot of guys get hung up on making them perfect, and they're not. I was that way when I first started, man. I'd get frustrated because they wasn't going straight. But if you keep the main areas straight as you can, and don't worry about the areas where it curves or changes, because it's going to do that on a real fish. So you kind of get the idea of how to blend that in. All right, so I've got all the body scales on, the big ones that I'm going to do for the bigger size. Actually, two different size scales. These were 4mm here and 3mm up here, and I'm getting ready to, and that's on both of these, both sides. And now I've just put on this. It's about a 2.5mm. Then I'm going to finish the head and the top of the scale, collar peduncle area, and the belly. So I'm going to finish all that with this smaller scale here, the smaller scale tip. And let's see here. I'm going to start down here on the belly. I'm just going to kind of tie all these in here. And I may even go down to a smaller one as I get right up next, down here on the belly, down here at the front of the head where the skull meets. And I'll do this one down to about, draw this line out here. This one will be done to about right here. And then I'll finish out a even smaller one. I think that's about a 2mm down here right on the edge of the tail fins. So let me do a couple of these down here on this one, and I need to fill in the rest of the rest of the lateral line here too, so I'll do that real quick. So you get the idea. I'm going to come right down the edge of this. Then we'll tie these in across the back here. And then I'll take it on up to where the fin edge will go. So I'll come in like right here with this one. And then I'll finish off the skull area right there. Actually, it's going to come down to about right there. So this one will come down to here, and then I'll finish off with this even little 2mm down here on this end. So get on that, and I'll show you as I get closer. Okay, so now I have the smaller. This is the 3mm tip. And I'm going to go in and we'll blend in these areas along the throat latch here, around the fins, in the caudal peduncle area here, and then I'll draw on the cheek scales here in a few minutes and show you that. So this is going through here and just, like I say, just filling in these other smaller ones here. Now there's a couple areas on a bass where there are no, like on the back here, there's no scales that go to the edge of the gill cover here. There's no scales right in this little area here. And there's a area through the eye, around the eyes here. Just a little path through here where it's almost like a bony plate there, and there's no scales in that. So you'll see that I won't be putting them right up against the gill plate there, or the gill cover. Those areas will be blended by sanding and then later with a little bit of epoxy sculpt. So you get the point. I'm going to finish this up here. Let me do a little bit down here by the tail. And I could probably even go smaller if I wanted to, just right along the edge. But I'm just going to stick with this one here. The scale pattern gets pretty erratic down here right next to the tail itself. So you get the idea. So I'm going to do that on both sides. Fill in up here. Fill in around the dorsal fin. Same on the largemouth. Fill in all this, and then I'll be starting the cheek scales. Alright, so I'm getting ready to do the cheek scales now, so I'm just drawing these on because they're all kind of irregular shaped. I'm going to use just a regular, I'm going to freehand these with this little rounded tip here. So I'm going to get them all drawn on, and then I will fire that up and start those. So let's see here. Then there's, like I say, there's an area around the eyes where there's no scales. And there's a little area back through here where there's no scales. And I forgot to finish off the, these need to come farther down here, and I didn't finish those. Did I do it on this one? Nope, I still got to come farther down on this one too here. So I'll do that off camera though. I'll finish drawing these on, show you what I'm doing here. Like I say, all these scales on the cheek and gill cover here are just, they're just irregular shape. They're not a standard, I mean, they're scale shaped, but they're not, there's too many different sizes and shapes on these two covers here to build a tip for. So I'm just, like I say, I'll just freehand them here with this other tip. So there's no scales here. So I will start about right here, drawing these around the eyes here. So I'll finish that and I'll come back and show you in a minute. Okay, so I've got them all drawn on here. And I'm going in with this little flat tip. And I'm just going to freehand all of these little scales here. Forgot to turn my phone off. How many of you just checked your phone to see if you got a message? Don't lie. Leave me a comment and say, yeah, you checked your phone. Alright, so this is actually a bony plate here. It's kind of underneath, so these plates slide back and forth underneath this one. So that one's, there's no scales on that. There's no scales to the end of this flap because it's a little flexible back here. And then there's none right along the top here. And of course there's none on the face or the scales or the head. There's none on the maxilla bone. So that's the cheek scales, and I'll do the same thing on all sides. And I do need to bring these scales down a little further here. So I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'm going to start work on the lateral line. And I'll go ahead and burn some growth rings in and show you that real quick. I don't want these real deep. I just want the hint of them to be there. This fish is 3 years old, so I'm putting 3 rings on each one. All right, so I'm going to move on to do the rest of these off camera because it's going to take me a couple hours to do them all. And like this video's gone way too long as it is. So I'll come back here in a minute and show you how I finished the body before I get ready to seal it and paint it. What I'm going to do to finish off these scales and do it before I get the fins mounted is I'm going to take this Scotch-Brite wheel. This is a one that I made, and I've got a video on how I make this if you want to see how I do that. And I just take it and I go over these scales, kind of a sand, and I will sand some as well because some of them are pretty high and deep, and I'll use a sanding pad to go over it. A lot of times this Scotch-Brite wheel will do what I need it to do, and I just kind of go in reverse over the scales. What it does is it knocks the edges off a little bit. Some areas where it's, like say, where it's too thick, where it burned too deep, and I'll take a sanding pad and go over it a little bit more, or one of my emery boards. And just kind of knock them down a little bit. And that'll kind of lessen the growth rings in there too. So I carve them a little deeper than I should, and then by sanding it down it takes them back closer to where I need them to be, or more realistic anyway. And I just kind of feel of it. I can tell where it's rougher still. Right there, it needs a little bit. It feels better. Alright, so I'll do that on the other one. I'll do the same thing on this one. You see how much darker it is. Takes off some of the char of the wood burner also. Alright, that's going to be it for part 4 of this twin bass wood carving project. We've got the scales and scale detail burned on both pieces here. And I know I said at the beginning of the video that it was going to be burning the scales and mounting the fins and eyes. But I think this project ran just a little bit too long, so it's been a while since I posted. So I'm going to go ahead and post this one as a standalone, and then part 5 coming up, I'll add the fins and eyes. I just didn't want you guys to think I've abandoned you. It's been so long since I've posted the video, but work has been crazy for me. Weather's been crazy, so I hadn't had much time to work on it. But I appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comment section below. And if you're new to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you consider subscribing. And if you like these videos, be sure to give me a thumbs up. See you on part 5.